understanding, Donzo is an evolutionist. So Donzo, welcome to the panel. And introduce you. You do sound familiar. I feel like you've been here before, but I could be wrong. Donzo,
I have been here once before.
God bless you, Donzo.
Okay. Good to have you, Donzo.
So yeah, I just wanted to speak real quick on the whales. What was it? Whales and sharks we were talking about earlier. Yeah. So the point of that argument is not to prove evolution. It's that earlier you said yourself that when we were talking about the percentages that are similar in animals, and obviously we're more genetically close to chimpanzees than any other animal on the planet, you said that if you went to a zoo, you could say to your child, well, which animal do you think you look the most like? And of course, they're going to say chimpanzees. Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So
they're definitely not going to come back with a whale. They're not going to come back with a puppy dog or a penguin.
Absolutely not. So the point of asking or pointing out that even though whales look more similar to sharks, but are genetically more similar.
Yeah, but they don't. That's the thing. They don't. That's like saying, well, see, a whale and a shark, they both swim in the water. Okay. But other than that, if you're not going to take a superficial look at them, you can see physiologically, there's huge differences. Whales are warm-blooded marine mammals. They give birth to their young and nurture their underwater, but they do that. Rather, sharks, they're cold-blooded animals. They lay eggs. There's differences, cartilage versus bone, hair versus. Okay.
Absolutely. Would you not agree that a whale looks more similar to a shark than a hippo?
Well, if you're just going to consider the fact that they're in the water, you're looking at fins, you're looking at flippers. Okay. But once you take a sophisticated look, then no, you're going to be forced to conclude that hippos and whales look a lot more like.
So the point of that argument is to show that it's to show the folly and logic that just to say that two things might look similar does not necessarily mean they're going to be genetically similar
or related.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Even if you were to take design modes, things that man has created, okay? Here on the slide, for example, you have would you agree that a surfboard and a sailboat, they're both for the water?
The problem with that is that, yes, I can agree that those things are more similar to each other. The only difference is we have witnessed literally humans creating those things, but we haven't ever witnessed anything creating.
Well, I've never specifically, well, here's the thing. I've never specifically witnessed somebody designing and building a Sea-Doo, a Ski-Doo, a cruise ship, but I can just tell by looking at these amazingly designed things that they had a designer. Okay. I don't have to see God designing a whale. I don't have to see God creating a hippo. Now we read about it in the Bible, it gives us a historical account of it, but you could, like, for example, the car in my neighbor's driveway. Okay. I don't have to see the person who made that car to know that it was designed. Well, so I understand what you're saying. I just don't think it's a very good argument. My whole point is this. Okay? I just want to say this, Gonzo, then you can go. You're missing my point. My point is the design hypothesis suggests that we should be able to get a sense for how God designed the biological world based on the way we design things. Okay. And it turns out that, yeah, we design things that are built and designed and have a function for the water. Okay. And yet they're more similar. Like, for example, a Sea-Doo is more similar to a Ski-Doo than the Sea-Doo is to the cruise ship, even though the Sea-Doo and the cruise ship are built for the water. And we see that kind of design in the biological world too, where you have a whale, which is designed for the water, and you have a shark, which is designed for the water. But the whale is actually more similar to the hippo when you examine the creatures in a sophisticated manner. So this actually matches designed expectations.
Let me make a comment real quick. So Donzo's basically trying to make this point that we've never seen anybody design a living creature before. Well, Well, the problem for evolution trying to use an argument like that is you've also never seen a pool of single-celled organisms evolve over billions of years into people. You've never seen that either. So you can't make a foundation for your argument based on that idea.
Okay.
Pretty much people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw
But
stuff.
here's the thing. Let me make a quick point and then I'll ask another question. So that's just like you said before. You said before during the whale and the shark argument, you said that you can't assume that you know how something would be designed. So that's what you're doing. You're assuming that because we design things in certain ways, that God must have designed animals certain ways.
That's not what I said. Actually, what I said
No, that
was
is what Donny said earlier.
Well, no. My point is, so we're starting from Genesis. Okay, Genesis claims to be the history book. We're going to make some predictions, some retrodictions. Well, the Bible claims, again, to be the history book of the universe. It also says that God created man in his image. Okay, so here's my hypothesis. If that's true, and we're made in the image of God, there should be something about us that reflects the divine. And therefore, we should be able to get a sense for how God created and designed the biological world based on the way we design and create things. And it turns out that that hypothesis has been validated in many ways, because guess what? In the biological world, we see homologous patterns. We see nested hierarchical patterns. In the design world of human man-made things, we see homologous patterns. We see that engineers build and design in hierarchical patterns. We see variations in design. You know, here in Canada, we have our steering wheels on the left side of the car. If you go to Britain or Australia, from my understanding, it's on the right side of the car. Okay. Variations in design. Some vehicles like the Volkswagen Jetta, you can get it in a diesel, you can get it in a regular. Okay. Variations in design are good. So my whole point is we can get an idea, and that's what we get. Human engineers build in the same patterns that we find in the biological world. Donzo,
well, to give a functioning example of how that actually works in biology, for people, you invent something like a wheel, and what do you do with it? You use it everywhere you can find a use for it. You can find use for a wheel on vehicles. You can find them in dishwashers. You can find them in printers. You can find them in machines that are used in manufacturing. You can find the wheel everywhere. You have a functional way of doing something. You just adapt it to the many different needs for it.
Right. And we have specific ways. We have reasons that we design the things we design that way. So the question is, how do you know that we designed these things? You didn't see them being designed, but how do you know that we designed those things?
It's because we've seen people design them.
It's the common human experience. I'm a mechanical engineer. That's what we do. Sorry, let me answer that real quick from an engineering perspective, because that's exactly what I do. I work at a company. We design equipment and build it. And so how do you know by looking at biology that it's designed? Well, I'm going to take the physics foundation that engineering is built on and explain that. It's called integration. When you take multiple parts and put them together in a functioning format that gives you an efficiency above zero, you have integrated them. You have integrated them for specific use. The biological world is extremely complexly integrated for high levels of efficiency that modern technology can't even achieve yet. Can't even come close to.
That's also debatable. It's highly debatable that you would say animals are efficient.
No, the ATP synthase that drives, basically, it's the currency of life is what it's called. And it's like 98.5+% efficient. It's a tiny little, well, it uses the positive charge instead of the negative charge like we do in electricity, but it uses positive ion flow. And it defies what you learn in physics classes like thermodynamics. In thermodynamics, they will tell you that the theoretically most efficient engine possible has infinite difference between the hot and the cold. In other words, the hot reservoir of a perfectly efficient engine, it has an infinitely high temperature, and the cold reservoir is basically zero. Well, that's obviously not true, because in the biological world, you literally approach 99% efficiency with almost zero difference in temperature. It's just a couple degrees in operating temperature.
But are you looking at a specific part of biology, or are you saying biology as a whole?
I'm telling you,
90%
ATP synthase. I'm telling you, ATP synthase, that is called the currency of life. That's where you get your energy from. That's what efficiency is. It's the amount of energy you get out divided by the amount of energy you put in.
I want to say this, Donzo. Linnaeus, he's the father of taxonomy, okay, as you know, and he was a creationist. He classified whales as mammals. Well, why? He didn't believe in evolution. He didn't believe in common descent. He classified mammals for functional reasons. He recognized, just like we recognize today, that although whales and sharks swim in the water, they share a lot of the same environments, okay? They diverge significantly at a physiological level. And so we as a creationist, there's two different models here. Hierarchical patterns by descent or hierarchical patterns by design. And so we would predict function in morphology, anatomy, genetics. And these predictions are becoming confirmed more and more every day, as we now know that over 80% of the genome, okay, is active, biochemically active. Now we can get into a whole nother debate. Does that mean true function? Is it spurious? Nonetheless, we see function after function. And so this is what we would expect as a creationist in light of these nested hierarchical patterns that we see in the biological world. Okay. Donzo, how would you respond to that?
So let me just ask real quick. So are we talking function as in locomotion? Are we talking function as in energy absorption and usage?
Good question. We're talking genetic function. My definition of function would be biochemical interactions that have consequences for the cell. Okay. And we find
Donny,
yeah,
Donny, could you say biological function is biological ability to do work in a biological context?
That would work too. Yeah. I like that. But here's it. So now Donzo.
So is that so again, I mean, that's just like, is that energy absorption? Is that reproduction? Is that
energy is used, like, for example, every time you add a nucleotide, a single nucleotide to a growing RNA chain, you're consuming ATP that T-Rock was just talking about. You're consuming energy. Okay. And we have a lot of transcripts in the genome. Over 60% of the genome's transcribed. And since transcription is an energy intensive process, I would argue that transcription is not spurious. It's functional transcription. This is functional activity.
DNA replication then?
Yeah, on a genetic level, right? DNA codes for proteins, codes for the what? The morphology, the anatomy. Okay, so of course we're going to look to the genome to answer this question.
I'm just wondering about the efficiency. So are we saying that DNA replication is 90% efficient?
The genome is
efficient. Well, let me answer that in as precise as I possibly can. So in physics, and because of the second law of thermodynamics, the simple answer is no, that's not exactly what you're talking about. ATP synthase, if you say it's 98.5% efficient, that means everything that comes from that has to be slightly less efficient than that. But it still has the ability to do useful work.
And it comes down to this, Donzo. Let me ask you.
I'm just trying to figure out real quick. I'm sorry, and then please go ahead. But I'm just trying to figure out how, if efficiency in machines leads to design, that's how we know humans have designed, technology because of how efficient it is. Then how biological organisms match up to that efficiency, and that's how we know that they too were designed.
You asking me or T-Rock?
I mean, anybody. It just seems like that's what the case was that T-Rock was making, that we know that machines were designed because of how efficient they are. And because biological organisms are so much more efficient even than machines, we must know that they were also designed. Was that not the argument that he was making?
T-Rock, if you wanted to respond, go ahead, brother.
That is essentially the argument. Yes, I will say this though, because if you look at something like a pencil doesn't have the ability to do work in and of itself. Part of what I was describing earlier was integration. You can't build a pencil without very specifically integrating materials in a way in which nature does not do on its own. And so when you're talking about biology, if you're talking, go back to the level of DNA and microorganisms, those constituent pieces that make up DNA, they do not integrate themselves in nature. They actually exclusively do the opposite outside of a living organism. They disintegrate. And so that's the earmark of design. It's basically two criteria that you can use. One of them is integration and the other one is efficiency.
And to me, disintegration sounds less efficient than machinery we create. So I would say that whether something is efficient or not, or how efficient something may be, is not really a good indicator of whether or not it was designed.
Can you show a functioning example where inanimate components integrate themselves and go from essentially zero efficiency to anything above zero efficiency?
Well, I mean, that to me sounds like abiogenesis, and that's not what I'm arguing.
Okay, Donzo, everything we're saying in terms of function is evidence for design, but you want an irrefutable line of evidence? Okay. These mutually interdependent systems. Okay. We can go over many. An easy one is the fact that we experience thousands of DNA breaks every single day. Okay. In every cell. And we have 60 to 100 trillion cells. Now, thankfully, we have these incredibly designed DNA repair enzymes, okay, that fix a lot of these breaks. If we didn't have them, we'd be extinct. We'd go extinct after a generation or two. Now, it turns out that the DNA repair enzymes, the information for them is actually encoded in the DNA. Okay, so you need the DNA and the DNA repair enzymes working and functioning at the same time. Okay, because if you were to have the DNA without the DNA repair enzymes, then the DNA is just going to be destroyed through all the mutations. If you have the DNA repair enzymes, well, you don't have the DNA to actually code the information to code for the DNA repair enzymes. So these are mutually interdependent systems. You have to have them both. Okay. And so that makes sense. Genesis says everything was created very good. Okay. So these things were created together, functioning at the start in the beginning. How do you explain that? What came first, the DNA or the DNA repair enzymes, Donzo?
I would say, is there any reason that they could not have come into existence at the same time?
How would DNA? So are you saying DNA and DNA repair enzymes would evolve, just spontaneously evolve and come about together at the same time? That doesn't make much sense, Donzo.
I mean, not necessarily spontaneously. However, like I said, it sounds like abiogenesis to me, and like that's not really necessarily what I'm arguing.
Well, I mean, it's not really abiogenesis because you have DNA, and then you have these DNA repair enzymes that, again, I said thousands. It's actually 1 million new DNA lesions in a cell every single day. We have more than 50 trillion cells in our body. Okay, so with 1 million DNA mutations in a single cell every day and 50 trillion cells in our body, that is a massive amount of damage that we are experiencing on a daily basis. So basically, without these DNA correcting machines, life couldn't exist. Like, we have to have DNA and DNA repair enzymes at the same time. And you could say, well, I guess they evolved both at the same time. Well, that would, as our title indicates, that would be a faith-based position. That would be a science fiction religion. You'd have to demonstrate how that's the case, Donzo.
I mean,
I
you're
can address
absolutely
that.
correct about that. I would have to, and I don't know too much about that. For me, it's just more about the understanding of how reproduction works and understanding that we definitely see animals making quote unquote other animals, and how that works and how the animals can change over time while that's happening. And
Yeah, but
being able to
reproduction
understand how
change
that
over
happens.
time. Reproduction and change over time. Nobody disagrees with that. You're looking for evidence for good design. You said you don't have an answer now. Maybe you can go look for them, but there's just one of many mutually interdependent systems. That's the question I have to the atheist. What came first, DNA or the repair enzymes that are necessary to maintain DNA? You need them both working at the same time. You asked for evidence for design. There's one. But, some people, the Bible says they're willingly ignorant. They're not really looking for an answer. There's a fact and a reality that any objective thinking person should look at and be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The information for the repair enzymes is encoded in the DNA itself. And so this all has to be true simultaneously, or living things don't exist. The best explanation for that is design, Donzo.
And I can absolutely look into that. I am nothing if not honest and like genuinely trying to understand. And I said to someone earlier in the chat, like, sometimes I wish that I could just believe in creation and just that be that. But it just doesn't make sense to me. And evolution just makes far more sense. What I've seen for that just makes far more sense to me than creation. However, yeah, maybe I should look up the DNA coding process and how it repairs itself and all that stuff. And hopefully I do find some answers, and I'll be sure, you can bet, to let you guys know what I find, what I think about that.
Well, Donzo, I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty and the engagement, especially on the hierarchy issue. We like to interact with the challenging arguments in terms of ancestry. So